Start with the paradigm with which you start the book, which is the two of the greatest athletes of our age, each of whom represents a different way of thinking about this problem of how to be great.
That's right. So the first one is Tiger Woods, of course, who I think is probably the single most famous example of athletic development, or maybe of expertise development in the world ever. And Tiger Woods was very unusual, of course, as a kid. I mean, if you read Earl Wood's book, there's pictures of Tiger bouncing on his palm at 6 months old, and he started golfing before he was 1, and all these things. And that sort of became the model from which we extrapolate to like anything that people want to get good at. And part of the argument that I make in the book is that golf actually turns out to be like a really horrible model of almost everything else that people want to learn in the wider world. But the other athlete I look at is Roger Federer, who is certainly as well known as an athlete, but his development story is much less well known, where he did an incredible array of sports, mostly in a very lightly structured environment, if structured at all. When he wanted to focus on tennis, his mother wouldn't allow him to focus on tennis, had to continue playing badminton, basketball, and soccer. And so he was like years behind many peers who were already working with like physiologists and nutritionists and focusing in. And that doesn't seem to have hampered his development.
Yeah.
We're obsessed with precocity, right? In some cases, we deem someone a genius because they did something early, even if their later development does not reflect that same trajectory. We're totally obsessed with precocity. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing because, we see it looks like the normal path, and there's people get to expertise and excellence via an incredible array of paths, but the norm is delaying, right? And, with all the selection mechanisms that we have in the world, even all this pressure that are forcing people to specialize, we're still seeing that the norm is people who can delay that. So I think there's an obsession with precocity in everything. Like, right, people think it's great if their kid learns to walk early or to read early, even though that has been shown over and over.
Great, finish the thought. I want to tell you something. Finish the thought.
To have like no predictive value for their ultimate outcomes, like whatsoever.
My brother, who's an elementary school principal, this is his favorite riff about how parents get so excited about the fact that their child will read early, reads early, and his whole point is, well, of what possible value is this when everyone learns to read eventually? Right? It's only useful to be first at something if you maintain that advantage over the course of your life. But
no, exactly. And there's been actually some really interesting work that I write about in the book, where if you look at all of kind of the Head Start academic programs that give kids like this incredible academic boost early on, there's a ubiquitous fade-out effect. It looks just like the curves of athletes, where the people who are specialized later are behind and then they cross over. It's the same thing, and the fade-out is actually a catch-up, because the quickest way to give someone an advantage is to teach them what's called closed skills, which are the things that you can teach them and you can measure the progress right away, and that everyone is going to learn anyway. So it's not a lasting advantage. So the more we push like kind of the hyper-specialized model of development, the more we focused on these closed skills that you can measure right away, and the more that's an advantage that's just going to fade out, which is why there's such like one of the reasons why there's such horrible transference from like youth athletes with highlight reels to adult.
I remember doing this.
The earlier you push selection, the more you select based on things that have nothing to do with their eventual development, like physical. So I mean, one of the interesting things I never hear anyone talk about in the NBA is like, the later you have your growth spurt, the taller you are likely to become. So the earlier you're deselecting people because they haven't had their peak height velocity yet, as the physiologist would say, the more likely you are missing the people who are going to have the biggest growth spurts. So is it a big surprise that like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman were like maybe today, well, at least not Jordan, but Pippen and Rodman probably would have been out of the pipeline today by the time that they had their growth spurts, right? Giannis looks like he's been going through puberty since getting drafted, right?
Yeah.
Right? And says the guy who like grows prepubescent facial hair still. But that's important. So you want to keep the pipeline as open as possible, so you're not deselecting people these young ages. Like Adam Silver said yesterday, maybe we should have these professional development academies that are sort of more professionalized for youth basketball players. And I get that, because I think the AAU system is a disaster, and I think those teams are more likely created around a player with potential than the player being subsumed in them. But that might be helpful for them, like learning life skills. But the European soccer clubs in a lot of ways are sort of trying to undo some of that. and like broaden their pipelines for these later developers and late bloomers like France did. So I think anytime the earlier you push selection, the more likely you're putting the wrong person in the wrong spot. So what economists refer to as match quality. The longer you can delay selection, the more likely you are to improve match quality. Early on, if we're talking about like most of the team sports, anticipatory skills, early on should totally focus on physical literacy. It doesn't matter if it's a sport or not, like teaching them how to use their body, basically. Whether that's outside, whatever it is, expose them to as much stuff as you possibly can, because they're also gonna, if they focus in on something, they're gonna have to do a lot of work, so you're gonna want them to like it. I think from what I know of it, an ideal trajectory was sort of Esther Ledecka, who became the first woman to win 2 different sports at the Winter Olympics, at this last Winter Olympics, where she wasn't focused on teenage categories. She still plays, she won in skiing and snowboarding. She still plays beach volleyball and windsurfing, and just did this incredible diversity of both team and individual sports, gaining all this incredible variety of skills. And then you can learn the like sport-specific stuff more quickly once you've got those skills, right? It's like, it's a little like language learning in that way. I want to be careful about the language acquisition research, because some of it I think is like kind of shoddy, but one that I think holds up is people who like grow up bilingual, they may be delayed a little bit in showing certain language skills, but if you then give them like a fake system of grammar, they will learn that language better than someone who's only monolingual. It's like you've created this sort of palette that allows them to learn new skills henceforth more quickly. And so I think you'd go for this just like for the skill building, this general physical literacy, and because you have to maximize their match quality. I think more people than ever are selected out either by their nature or by their nurture from becoming an elite athlete. And so you really have to expose them to enough things that they can try to optimize their match quality or fit in where they fit best.